Well, the really bad part is failure activities. Failure activities include the things you can see on the slide. Canceling projects because they weren't done right, rework and scrap cost, warranty repairs, engineering changes, and the one that's growing in today's world, lawsuit kinds of settlements, money spent on those. Now let's talk just a little bit more about the reasons for project failure. I've already said failing to define the problem to be solved is, in my experience, the biggie. And it's very interesting to me because when you say to people, we need to write a problem statement, they invariably say to you, we don't need to do that, we all know what the problem is. And in one such instance, I said to the people in the group, well, let's just do it as a formality. If we really do all know what the problem is, it'll take 2 minutes to write it down. So let's do it. And it took them 3 hours to agree on what the problem statement was. Lack of planning. Not understanding customer requirements. I'm sure all of you know that in hardware design projects and some software projects, the engineers and programmers assume that they know what the customer should have. So we don't care what the customer says, we're going to give them what we want them to have, end of discussion, and of course that invariably leads to problems. Number 4, ballpark estimates become targets. The way this works is it's Friday afternoon about 4:30, 5 o'clock. Somebody in senior management or the project sponsor comes by your desk and they say, I need an estimate for a project. And they give you a rough description of it. And you say, well, I need some time to do that. And they say, oh, we don't have time to do it. It's just a budgetary thing, you know, so just give us a ballpark estimate. And of course you give them that number, which can be a really, really sloppy tolerance. And a few weeks go by and they come back to you and they say, we're going to do that project and you're the project manager. And you suddenly discover that this thing that you gave them a ballpark for is nothing like what you thought it was. And you say, folks, this is going to cost a lot more than I said it was going to cost. And they said, no, it's not. We've already made commitments on that number and you're going to have to find a way to meet that target. And of course then the project winds up being way over budget and everybody's in trouble. Finally, number 5, estimates are based on wishful thinking. I want to come back to the Standish Group results and just make a comment. Success and failure is defined as, did you meet the targets? Okay, the question is, where did the targets come from? In all too many cases, they were just best guesses or wishful thinking. We're hoping we can do it for that, and they had no credibility, they had no substance behind them. And I submit to you that failing to meet a target that wasn't realistic in the first place is not a failure of project management, it's a failure to be real about what the targets should be. Yes?
I have a question on the not understanding customer requirements. Very often you find customers who don't know what their requirements are. They're working with new technology and they are trying to be at the leading edge, and they come back to you and say, oh, we forgot, and you want to be customer focused and respond to that. And it's a real conundrum.
That's why there is a book out, and the name escapes me at the moment, on particular software development projects and the evolutionary nature of them. It is absolutely true that in cutting edge kinds of technology, the customer doesn't know exactly what they want, nor do they know what the technology or the software can do, and so it becomes a learning experience for everybody involved, and you can expect that those kinds of projects actually grow. Oh, the name of the book is Adaptive Software Development, and I don't recall the author, but that's the title, Adaptive Software Development, because you have to adapt to the learning that's taking place in the environment. The other thing that we have to be very realistic about in today's world is that with the speed of change taking place out there in the marketplace, if a project takes longer than a few months, you can bet that something in the environment is going to change and you're going to have to respond to it. And so the ultimate time and cost for projects is very difficult to pin down, and as long as we understand that, the better off we'll be. However, there is one partial solution to that, and it is that you have to get products to market as quickly as possible before the world does spin around a time or two and obsolete what you're doing. So rapid product development is a really big push, and this is one area where project management can be a contributor. The definition phase of a project involves more than just a problem statement. It also involves writing a mission statement for the project and having a vision for the end result. Now, what I find in talking to people is there's an awful lot of confusion about those words. We use the words mission and vision to mean pretty much the same thing, and so people get very confused about what the difference is. So let's talk about that for just a moment. Mission versus vision, that's the good one. Vision is simply what the final result is going to look like. It defines done. If I know what the final result is going to look like, especially for hardware, and I see the thing look that way, then I know I'm finished with it. This is much harder with intangible things than it is with tangible stuff. For example, if you're developing software, it isn't a tangible thing, and it can be very difficult to create a vision for that everybody can understand. And there's a key word. It's got to be a shared vision. It's got to be something everybody understands and buys into. One way that I use to show people what the difference is shown in the chevron, where I talk about every project solving a problem. So let's take a simple example. Assume for a moment that you've taken a job in a new city and you plan to move there. So the first thing that occurs to you is, oh, I've got to find a place to live. So somebody says to you, what are you trying to do? You say, well, I got a problem. I got to find a place to live. They say, well, what's your mission? I got to find a place to live. Well, what's your vision? To have a place to live. See, they all sound the same, so no wonder people get confused. So the way I get out of this contradiction, or whatever you might want to call it, is to say a problem should always be stated as a negative. I don't have a place to live. That's the problem I'm trying to solve. The vision is the requirements for the place. And there's a technique that's been used for a long, long time, developed originally by Kepner and Trigo in problem solving, in which you have to list the things that you absolutely must achieve, things that you want to achieve, and things that would simply be nice to achieve. So we call these must, wants, and nice to haves. So in terms of a place to live, I might say, okay, it's got to have 3 bedrooms and so many square feet of floor space, and I want it to be on a 1-acre lot. And for me, those are must-haves. They may not be for everyone, but for me they are. In terms of wants, I'd like to have room for a home office in my basement, and so on. And then nice to haves might include a fireplace in the family room, maybe a vaulted ceiling, things of that nature. But those are negotiable. I wouldn't be excited if I couldn't find those. Well, what's the mission now? It's actually to achieve the vision. I wouldn't state my mission statement that way, but that's essentially what it is. The way I'd write the mission statement is to say my mission is to find a place to live that conforms to these requirements. And you notice that if I do that, I have achieved my mission. I've achieved my vision, and I've solved my problem. Now, the difficulty you have in projects is project managers almost never get this stuff in this order. In fact, seldom does anybody actually talk about a problem. They come to you with a mission statement, and they say, here's your mission, go do this. All right? It's the project manager's responsibility to backtrack, to go back to the problem statement and say, what is the problem we're actually trying to solve, and make sure that it agrees with the mission that they've been given. Otherwise, as Dr. Peter Drucker has often said, you're going to come up with the right solution to the wrong problem and waste an awful lot of money. In my experience, the number 2 cause of project failures is people problems. And this is a really interesting problem because companies don't tend to invest very much in solving this problem. Every year I teach about 40 3-day project management programs, and I only teach 3 or 4 project management team programs, that is, ones that focus on behavioral skills. People don't see a bottom line relationship to the soft stuff, the touchy-feely stuff. But think about this. In all the years I've been in project management, I don't think I've ever seen a project fail simply because someone didn't know how to put together a critical path schedule. But I've seen an awful lot of them get in serious trouble and even fail because of people issues. And I'm sure you've seen the same thing. So these are skills that people aren't born with. They have to be taught these skills, and we should be investing a lot more money in those areas and giving them better attention. Some of the people problems that you see are listed on the slide. Communication problems, conflicts, egos getting in the way of doing things, people having hidden agendas, poor teamwork, and cultural differences. And the last two of these are becoming considerably more important in America today than they used to be. For example, the poor teamwork, a lot of people say in the States, well, you know, we're not real natural team players in the U.S. because we're rugged individualists. Our country was founded by a bunch of rugged individuals. Well, that may be true, but when they had to cross a river, that didn't preclude teamwork. They cooperated. The only thing that precludes teamwork is not being willing to cooperate with somebody. So I don't buy that stuff about we're rugged individualists. Matter of fact, think about it. Which would you rather have a team of, rugged individualists or a bunch of wimps? It's pretty obvious, isn't it? Cultural differences aren't just based on nationality or anything like that. In the United States, if you travel north, south, east, west, you find cultural differences based on geography. Folks in the northeast tend to be faster paced than folks in the southeast. And when I lived in Raleigh for 25 years and the migration started in here from up in the northeast, there were cultural problems because the folks from the northeast were faster paced and we're going too slow for them, and they're saying, why don't you guys speed up? And we're saying, why don't you slow down? And they were totally mystified by grits. They didn't know what to make of those. And they didn't know about Eastern North Carolina barbecue, which is unique unto itself. So, you know, all these cultural differences came into play. Now, when you add the dimension of other countries, which many of our projects are internationally based, either because they're global or simply because people have moved into the U.S. from other countries, serious misunderstandings can take place. Just serious misunderstandings. Just as a simple example, I used to go to Singapore and Malaysia quite a bit, and fortunately I had read a book about cultural differences that told me about this before it happened, so when it did happen I could get a good laugh out of it. I did some work for the oil company over there, and they took me to the airport in a company car, actually a company van, and I was the only passenger. So I got in the back seat of the van. The driver looked back at me. He says, sir, he says, you're kind of fat. He said, you'd be more comfortable sitting up here in the front seat. And I thought it was a riot because I could just see this poor guy coming to the United States and getting a job as a van driver, right? And telling some passenger, you're kind of fat, would you like to sit up front? And they get real indignant, and the poor guy gets fired, and he says, what happened? I was just trying to be helpful, which is all he's trying to do. What the book had told me, though, was that being fat in that part of the country, that part of the world, is not a stigma like it is in the United States. It's actually a sign of affluence. Because over several thousand years of history, unless you had a lot of money, you didn't eat a diet that made you fat. So if they see someone that's overweight, they're usually fairly prosperous. So it's definitely a different sort of thing, see? And very easy to be offended by something that nobody meant anything by whatsoever.
Did he expect a bigger tip?
Probably so. Okay, moving right along. Does anybody have any questions before I do?
I wanted to go back to the
Chevron?
The Chevron, and again, in the customer requirements area, what you find happens is as the project goes on, especially with new technology, you find that the wants and the nice start getting moved to the left,
Yes.
to the musts.
Yes.
And it's a constant struggle.
It's called feature creep. And somebody has to be very hard-nosed about that and ask, would the customer pay for it? And how much would they be willing to pay for it? And Smith and Reinertsen have said that in terms of rapid product development, get the simplest thing to market that you can get to market, and then come back and put these enhancements in. But if you get it to market in a hurry, you start generating sales revenue, which pays for the enhancements. Whereas if you continue doing enhancements without putting anything on the market, you're just burning your money up in a heartbeat. Okay, let's talk about what you need to be successful in project management. There's a slide here that shows that good project management requires attention to three things: tools, people, and systems. Now, we've talked about the problem with hit and run training. where we teach people project management and we put them back in the job, but we don't support them. We've attended to the people component. We also have talked about the use of scheduling software, which is a tool. So we give people a tool and we think, okay, they're a project manager now. Unfortunately, neither of those solves the total problem. What's missing in many organizations is the system component. We find that there aren't good tracking systems, there's no good project review method, there's no good project accounting, and so we don't have systems that are actually necessary for people to do the job correctly. You notice that it's at the intersection of tools, people, and systems where you get good project management. And those three things must be jointly optimized. They've got to be jointly optimized. They've got to be optimized to work together. Some of the tools you need: scheduling software, the use of PERT and CPM, performance evaluation review technique and critical path method, work breakdown structures, earned value analysis. Those are all the tools of project management. In fact, I call my introductory course Project Management Tools, Principles, Practices. The systems that we need are shown on the next slide. We need a project accounting system. We need a project management methodology, which is a standard way of doing project management. We need a control system. We need a project prioritization system, which means that we have to decide in what order projects should be done. And you notice that these are all things that senior managers must attend to, because only senior managers can decide what those priorities actually are. And we need a resource allocation system, because no organization has unlimited resources, and the only way that you can make sure that your top priority projects get done is to properly resource them. And again, this is a senior management issue. And you also need a reward system that is consistent with good project management. Some of the people skills that I would recommend that you think about include the ones shown on the slide. Leadership is at the top of the list for a very specific reason. Warren Bennis, who has studied leadership for years, likes to say we've got way too many managers and not enough leaders. A leader is somebody that's able to inspire people. In fact, Vance Packard likes to define leadership as leadership is the art of getting people to want to do something that you're convinced should be done. Notice the operative word. A leader is able to get people to want to do something that you're convinced should be done. How many people do you know who are able to actually exercise leadership? Managers get people to do things, but not necessarily because they actually want to do it. It's a requirement of the job, and there's a little coercion, and there's pay and things of that nature. But if you turn your back, people don't get real excited about what they're doing in those cases. So I really strongly believe that a basic requirement for anybody to be successful as a project manager is that they know something about leadership and they're able to exercise it. We also need to know how to build teams. Teams don't just happen, they have to be built. In my book, Team-Based Project Management, I address the process by which you turn a group into a team. If you look at sports teams, you'll see wonderful examples of how that has to be done. Teams don't just get built overnight. It takes a lot of time for a group to become a really well-functioning team. Another skill that people need to know how to deal with is conflict management. As a matter of fact, Mike told me recently about a manager he knows who really can't deal with conflict. Every time a conflict comes up, the only thing this poor fellow knows to do is walk away from it. He is just absolutely paralyzed by it. He does not know how to deal with it. And of course, it just goes underground and smolders and blows up eventually. So this person needs to know how to deal with conflict, or else he can't be effective. The next one in the list is negotiation skills. One of the universal complaints of project managers is that they have a lot of responsibility and they have no authority. And I always say to them, get used to it, because as near as I can tell, it's never going to change. And it's an overblown problem anyway, or an overblown complaint, I would say, because if you ask any CEO of any company in the world, you got a lot of authority, and they say yes. Well, does your authority guarantee that people do what you want done? And they say no. Well, how do you get them to do what you want done? Well, I got to get them to want to. See, there's that leadership thing again. Well, if a CEO has to use influence and persuasion and maybe even beg once in a while, project managers can't do any better. And negotiation becomes a major part of it, particularly in dealing with subcontractors and if you're in a matrix organization dealing with functional managers. The next skill listed is persuasion and influence. It goes hand in hand with negotiation. It's actually a major component required for good negotiations. So project managers need a good dose of that one. Next in the list is communication skills. I like a comment by Alan Mulally, president of Boeing Commercial Airplanes. He says, "We have the mistaken belief that because we've talked, we've communicated." And I think there's a great deal of truth in that. And I had a fellow in a class this week say to me that he started out in the class saying he was an old dog and he didn't know if we could teach him any new tricks, but at the end he said, "You know, you did confirm one thing for me." He said, "Listening is a lot more important than talking." And that's true. Next in the list, political skills. This is one that drives technical people crazy. Engineers, programmers, you name it, scientists. You've got to have political skills, and engineers and programmers are always saying, "Oh, I hate politics." Well, I know what they mean by that. They mean I hate negative, backstabbing politics, and so do I, and I do not condone the use of them or encourage it. But what they don't understand is that every act in an organization is a political act, like it or not. You're always being observed by somebody, and it has an influence somewhere, and you might as well understand that and learn to play positive politics. It's the only way you'll survive. Finally, cultural sensitivity. Since all these cultural differences do exist, we have to learn to recognize them. I'm going to give you a basic, simple example. I teach all over the United States, and a lot of the meals that we have at lunchtime are buffets. And I had one recently where they served ham. That was the only meat they served. Well, not only do Jewish people not eat ham, neither do Muslim people, who are a growing part of this population, but we also have a lot of vegetarians, and it's very hard for a vegetarian to even get a decent meal under those conditions. We need to be more sensitive to these kinds of things, and we need to make sure that we have catered to the different groups that we're dealing with, okay? Now, in addition to the skills I've already listed, there's a whole bunch of supporting skills here. It's amazing to me. We've all been taught to be problem solvers. Man, if you're a technologist, you've had tons of education about how to solve problems, and yet we don't do it very well. We also don't really know how to do good decision making. And a fellow named Irving Janis wrote a book years ago on decision making, in which he talks about the disasters that have occurred because of flawed decision making in groups. For example, President Kennedy, and the Cuban situation, where he sent troops down there because he suggested to his cabinet that he thought that might be what they should do, and they just bought into it. This is called groupthink. And there are procedures to avoid it if we know what they are, but most of us don't. Another one that we don't seem to know enough about is innovative thinking. And organizations have to survive through innovative thinking, and yet people don't know how to do it very well. Again, we Americans tend not to be very good team players, so we lack team skills. We don't know how to facilitate groups, particularly meetings. Our meetings are just absolute disasters. They take too long, they cost too much money, they waste time, they don't accomplish what they're supposed to. And a wonderful resource for that is a book by Tom Kaiser from Xerox called Mining Group Gold, M-I-N-I-N-G, Mining Group Gold. Get good results from that group. And if you'll read his book and practice what he advocates, you'll find it'll improve your group meetings considerably. General management skills. One of the things that I find for project managers that's missing is they come out of the classes on project management with the tools of project management, but they still don't think like managers. Managers have a certain way of thinking about things, and a lot of these folks don't do that yet. And then, of course, we need project management skills as a support tool, not just from the project manager, but from the members of the team. And the reason for that is very simple. A project plan should always be put together participatively. The general rule is the people who have to do the work should help put the plan together. So they need to know a little bit about project management. How do you put together a work breakdown structure? How do you estimate and all those kinds of things so that they can participate in that planning phase. Now then, we said there's 3 components we need to address: tools, people, and systems. There is a very strong tendency for us to try to sub-optimize. That is, we will train people really, really, really well and not do anything to develop the systems that they need to make the training work. Or we will give them the world's most wonderful tools without at the same time giving them the training on how to use those tools. And so we're sub-optimizing. There's a very simple reason why we fall into this trap. It goes back a long, long time in history, and I'll save the historical discussion by just saying that we've been taught to think that if we improve the functioning of the accounting department, it will improve the performance of the entire company. And we create monsters when we do this sometimes.